One area a lot of companies want to put a lot of thought and spend some time actually understanding is how security changes when we move from an on-premises environment into the cloud, especially working with Office 365. When we move to Office 365, one of the things we have to think about is that some of the responsibilities are actually transferred off of us into Office 365. Security updates and patching. We no longer run or support the systems that are actually managing our content now, so that becomes somebody else's responsibility. Any software or feature upgrades that we would normally want to think about implementing on premises, those now become something managed by the cloud provider, in this case Office 365, right? And server maintenance and troubleshooting. I don't think about or worry about uptime for my Exchange server farm now, right? That high availability becomes Microsoft's issue, something that they have to think about that. In addition to that, other threats like DDoS attacks, operating system attacks, application and hardware attacks, all of these types of things are now being transferred to Office 365 as their responsibility. Microsoft has to protect the cloud. I kind of like to look at it in two ways. Number one, Microsoft has a tendency to have to protect the cloud itself. We're going to be responsible for protecting what we put in the cloud. So you kind of have that shared responsibility of what you actually put in the cloud while Microsoft protects the cloud itself, including from things like physical attacks. So there's some very important changes out there, right? Now that I'm in Office 365, that service is connected straight to the internet, right? Anybody that has internet connectivity can get to Office 365 now. Yes, of course, Microsoft is protecting that data in certain ways, but it is directly connected to the internet. The user interfaces, all of the services that we're going to use, we have access to over the web. Same for our administrative access, right? For me to be able to go out there and configure and add users and change policies and create settings in Office 365, that's all done over the web. Whether that's over the portal through a graphical user interface using the GUI, or maybe it's through PowerShell, but either way, I'm still remoting into that system and actually taking care of those things in a remote manner. So you have to be aware that those things are actually out there now on the web in that environment. So the threats that we're facing have kind of changed a little bit. Now when we're thinking about 365, one of the biggest threats we have is identity attacks, right? Somebody's going to go out there and try to steal our authentication mechanism, either through a brute force attack or a password spray or password reuse attack. Have the ability to go out there and try to get in. And once they gain access to it, then they can do anything they want to with their account. Right, and 365 accounts are going to be something you'll see a lot of people trying to hack into because of the vast amount of information that would be available once they gain access to that actual account. In terms of application and data attacks, think about things like delegation rules, right? If I go out there and I get a brute force attack in and I gain access to your environment, maybe I'm not going to do something so apparent that you're going to realize that I've actually gained access to your account. In fact, most people on average say that a hacker will be in your system typically about 6 months before people realize they're actually there. Instead, they'll look at doing things like delegating authority to somebody else. Maybe create a user if you have an account that gives them that permission. You won't realize it, and they've delegated authority to that account, and now they have full access to the environment. Forwarding things, having the ability to go out there and actually forward information onto other people. And then they can start leveraging things like social engineering. If I'm inside your environment, if I've gone in and I've gotten available, an ability to create an account for myself inside your 365 tenant somehow, just imagine what somebody in your organization might do if they get an email from somebody that appears to be within the organization requesting some information. There's a much higher probability that they're going to get the information they want through some type of social engineering attack. So as we work with Office 365 and we want to think about protection for Office 365, we have to understand that authentication is absolutely critical, right? And that's going to be part of the environment that we're going to have to pay very close attention to. We still have the need and we still have the ability to configure some of the feature configuration in there, things like the ability to have legal hold, data loss prevention rules, go out there and enforce multi-factor authentication and things like that in our environment. So we have the ability to go out there and try to improve that authentication mechanism, and certainly MFA or multi-factor authentication can go a long way to that. If somebody has my username and password, they may get past those first couple of steps. But then when it asks them to go out there and either verify the authentication on a cell phone app or get a code or something like that, that hopefully will stop them in their tracks and they won't be able to get in. All right, so and also at the same time signal to me to let me know, hey, somebody's trying to get into the environment. So protecting your environment with multi-factor is going to be one of those things that you want to definitely look into. You want to utilize Azure Information Protection, right? Azure Information Protection will allow us to extend that authentication requirement, extend that accessibility beyond just the actual 365 environment. Somebody downloads a document from a SharePoint library. If we've got it protected still with Azure Information Protection, their credentials will restrict what they're allowed to do with it. So if they're only allowed to read it, they don't have the ability, for example, to go out there and create and make and modify changes on that document. So it makes things a little bit better for us in our environment. So we want to go out there and also pay attention to what's called the secure score in 365. And in another video, we'll certainly look at that. The ability for them to give you an idea of exactly what it is that you have available in terms of protection options, which ones you're using right now for your organizations, and more importantly, which ones you're not that you may want to actually go out there and think about using. So as we move to 365, our security focus and concern really needs to start changing a little bit. Instead of worrying about that perimeter environment, start worrying about that authentication environment and how we're actually controlling access to our service.